and welcome back to my channel where I'm going to cover the Druid's Circle of Spores class specialization from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, providing a brief description of the subclass as well as explain and set up the various features gained. The Druids of this circle are more in tune with the cycles of life and death, and as a result, deal with death as an avenue that leads to more life. They are also the only Druid class that does not see anything wrong with undead creatures, which most Druids consider to be an abomination of life. They could essentially be classified as the Necromancer class of the Druids, if you will. However, they do disagree with undead creatures turning all life into undeath, as it does violate the cycle of life. So while they don't really find anything wrong with undeath itself, they will still take steps to ensure that the undead do not get out of control and take over where the cycle of life is essentially at risk of being violated. As we have discussed in previous videos, a Druid chooses their circle at level 2, giving the player some time to decide what circle they want to take before they commit to it. As a result, I've included a link to a video where I go through and create a base Druid character so that we can cover the bulk of what they learned at level 1 and set up those features in preparation to gaining level 2. You can find that link in the description below. With that, let's go ahead and drop our second level into place. I am then going to choose Circle of Spores, and now we can begin to take a look at our first feature. As soon as the class specialization is dropped into place, the first feature your character is going to unlock is called Circle Spells, in this case of the Spore Circle, and it gives your character access to very specific spells that a Druid would not normally have access to, much like a Cleric's domain of spells would for a given Cleric. Initially, your character will learn the Chill Touch cantrip, but new spells become available to your character at 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th levels, with each level giving your character 2 additional spells. Much like a Cleric's domain spells, these spells are always available for you to use and do not account against any of your prepared spells list, and are always considered prepared. In order for you to cast them, however, your character will still have to have an available spell slot available, with the exception of the cantrip. Now, in relation to the cantrip, setting it up is essentially straightforward. All I'm going to do is drag and drop that into place. I do not need to set this feature or this cantrip up in any other special way because it is a cantrip. I don't need to apply it and add it to a subgroup of its own. And that's simply because cantrips are always available to you. They don't get prepared. When we increase this character's level to level 3, I will show you exactly what we need to do in order to set up 3rd level spells. In this particular case, the Blindness and Deafness, as well as Gentle Repose. So for now, let's move on to our next feature. Also at level 2, your character is going to gain access to the Halo of Spores feature, which allows you to create an invisible sphere of necrotic spores that you can use to attack creatures that get within 10 feet of your character. Your character would use their reaction to turn these spores loose on a given creature that is within the 10-foot range, and will do an initial 1d4 points of necrotic damage as long as the creature failed a constitution-based saving throw. The creature themselves would have had to have moved to a spot within reach of the spores, or started their turn within the sphere of spores, if you will, in order for your reaction to apply to the creature. And you can only do this to one creature at a time. You are effectively using your reaction to attempt to apply the effect. So you will only really have time to react against one creature. As indicated earlier, the spores will do an initial 1d4 points of necrotic damage, but it will increase to 1d6 at level 6, 1d8 at level 10, and finally will do 1d10 when your character reaches a druidic level that reaches level 14. So let's go ahead and set this up on our character's action sheet here. I'm going to quickly drag and drop this into place, and I'm going to create a new group called Circle of Spores. Excellent. The only thing that is missing is the Constitution saving throw, so we have to go through and add that. Now that falls under the cast. It's not obvious, but this is where you're going to find this. And what this is going to do is it's going to be a Constitution-based saving throw that uses your group DC. Now, before we're considered done, I'm going to modify our power group so that it uses our character's spellcasting ability when it comes to triggering effects. And I want this. So it is going to be your wisdom modifier in this particular case. So I want to set this up as wisdom for all of these things. Oops, there we go. Excellent. So now we have the Constitution save of DC 14. Perfect. Now, any additional features that we add into here will automatically calculate this, although we might have to just pop it open so that it can do the calculation. And that sets it up and is now ready to go. So at levels 6, 10, and 14, we're going to want to make sure that we adjust this. The last feature that your character is going to gain at level 2 is called Symbiotic Entity, and it provides an alternative use to your character's Wild Shape feature. With this feature, you work more closely with the Halo of Spores and gain a few additional benefits because of it. The first is that for every level of the Druid your character gains, you will gain 4 temporary hit points, such that at level 2, your character can already gain 8 temporary hit points that you can apply as soon as you activate the Halo of Spores feature. Now, that level restriction means it has to be your Druidic level, in the sense that you cannot make use of a fighter level if you're multiclassing. For example, if you have a level 6 fighter but a level 2 Druid, then it's going to be your Druidic level that applies, not your total level or your fighter level. The second benefit is that when you make use of your reaction to attack a creature with the spores themselves, you can roll the damage die a second time to do an additional amount of damage to the target. So in the case of our starting character here, 1d4 points of necrotic damage is what we initially do. We would now be able to roll that die a second time to do an additional 1d4 points of necrotic damage. And finally, the third benefit is that you will be able to deal an extra 1d6 of necrotic damage to any target that you hit with a normal melee weapon. So that could be staff, quarterstaff, scimitar, whatever you happen to be holding that would be classified a non-magical weapon, although technically magical weapons would theoretically still apply. You would have had to have already had the Halo of Spores active before you got into a combat situation in order for you to be able to make use of this during the first round of combat. But in the event you did not, you would have to expend the first round activating your Halo of Spores feature before making use of this feature, not just any of the benefits that include with the feature, but the whole feature and all of its benefits as a result. And you would only be able to activate this particular feature in subsequent rounds, because you cannot activate Halo of Spores in one round as well as activating the Symbiotic Entity. It's literally you activate Halo of Spores during your first round, and then from rounds 2 and up, you would have the ability to be able to use Symbiotic Entity. However, this feature only allows the latter two effects to be in place for no more than 10 minutes, or until your character runs out of temporary hit points or chooses to use the Wild Shape feature. And it essentially comes down to which of those three things expires first. Have you run out of your 10 minutes before you've burned through your temporary hit points? Have you already gone through all of your temporary hit points before you've reached the 10-minute duration? Or did you choose to use the Wild Shape feature a second time? Those are the things you'll have to consider. In relation to Symbiotic Entity's first benefit here, you don't really need to do this. All you would really do is add 2 die roll for Halo of Spores' damage. This, though, we will probably want to add as an effect to our character. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this into place, copy this, put that into place there. And we already have the 1d6 necrotic damage effect already in place, so we don't need to worry about setting that up. We also have the temporary hit points already ready to go, so we don't even need to worry about setting that up either. The only thing that I'm going to look at here is this. If we take into account our Druidic level, so we go down until we see DRD, and it's not going to be DRD plus this. It is literally going to be times this. So what we want to do is delete that and put a 4 here. And that'll ensure that we have 8 temporary hit points. And because we've already got the multiplier in place, we don't need to worry about recalculating this each time our character levels up in the Druid level. The other adjustment we're going to want to make is to this particular effect here. We want this to be around for about 10 minutes, or the equivalent of how long our Halo of Spores feature comes into play. So it's not really 10 minutes per se, but this at least guarantees that it's going to go around. So let's get rid of it. Let's choose minutes, not that. It's going to apply to yourself, and it will expire on the next roll. So nothing else we need to adjust there. You will have to be cognizant that this effect won't necessarily go away at the time that you activate this effect. So, there might I wish there was a way that we could actually set it up to check to see if Halo of Spores is still there before we activate the spell. Give me a minute. I'm going to see if I can find some research and see if I can dig that up. Actually, there is a way that we can do this. I just remembered my Hunter's Mark configuration that I had set up. Except this time I'm going to put it on my own character. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to modify Halo of Spores and add a new effect. I'm simply going to put in, for this effect, Halo of Spores. And all I'm really doing is going to be adding a marker. This maximum duration is going to be 10 minutes normally, but what I'm going to do for demonstration is set this up to be 1 round. It's going to be on the self and it never expires because we're going to let the duration do the expiration. Next, I'm going to modify this effect here. I'm then going to insert this. So it's an if condition. So if colon, custom all in capital letters, open round bracket, Halo of Spores, and it has to match the exact name that we've got here, close round bracket, semicolon, then our damage. I am going to adjust nothing else with this particular effect, although I do have a small bug here. I need to get rid of that so that I don't get the double semicolon reference there. Now here's how this is going to work. I'm going to apply this effect to myself. This is literally just a marker of an effect to tell the DM that Halo of Spores is still around. Now I'm going to attack the vampire. And just for kicks, I'm going to apply this effect into place. Let's see, am I going to hit this time? No. Oh, wait, yep, so that's a hit. Now I'm going to do my damage. You'll notice that I've got 2d6 that got rolled, and here is why. The if condition matched the marker of the Halo of Spores. Because that marker was there, it rolled the extra 1d6 of damage. Now, if I apply this effect again to my character, but burn through the turn, so that the Halo of Spores effect goes away, now if I try to actually roll the damage again, we'll see we're only getting 1 dice. That is an excellent way to control how this is going to function. So, now the problem is that this won't go away because the match didn't happen. So, I'm going to get rid of that. Excellent. I'm also going to adjust this back so that it is the 10 minutes that it should be. Oops. There we go. Now we have resolved this portion of the issue. We can't do it for the temporary hit points. So you're going to want to remove the temporary hit points when the Halo of Spores effect goes away. Nothing we can really do about that. So I've gone ahead and increased our character's level to level 3 so that we can showcase how to deal with Circle of Spores. Now, Circle of Spores is going to give us access to the blindness and deafness spell, as well as gentle repose. What I want to do is ensure that these spells remain separate from my base Druid spells that I'm going to get, and these ones are both level 2. I simply haven't added any level 2 spells despite the new level increase for my normal Druid level. But here's what I want to do. I'm going to drop this into place. I am now going to get a quote-unquote new spells group. What I want to do is call this Circle Spells. Now what's going to happen is I've created a new group that is specific to Circle Spells. This group should already have all my base DC stuff set up, and it should in fact be a spell group, but it isn't. It's an abilities group for some reason, so we need to switch that. That's about all we have to do. Now it should calculate the spells correctly. Everything else here should already be set up from a spell's perspective, minus one thing. We're going to want to make sure that we just tick this and make sure it's prepared. I'm also going to drag Gentle Repose into here. And I'm not sure why. Where did you go? Gentle Repose. Okay, so it is there. So it did properly add Gentle Repose here. Excellent. Now, as we level our character up, we're going to want to drop, let's say, Animate Dead here, into this group here, not into our level 1 spells group or any of the other spell groups that we have, because what's going to then happen, and I will show you this when we get there, is it will automatically create the next circle spells group and match all the settings that we have in our power group to go with it. To showcase that, I have gone ahead and leveled up our Druid to level 5. I'm now going to go back to my Actions tab and take Animate Dead and drop it right on top of Circle Spells. Now we will see that we have Circle Spells here. I'm going to ensure that I have Gaseous Form, and regardless of whether I drop it on the level 2 here or the level 3, it will automatically apply it to the level 3 section. Then I just want to simply make sure that all of those are prepared, because they don't count towards our prepared spells at all, so that means that you can leave them as always prepared. It's something I should have done in previous videos when I was discussing the Cleric, but I never actually did. In this particular case, it makes sense to me because it's not going to count towards your total prepared spells, because they're in a separate group, whereas these ones down here would be spells that you could sort of toggle on and off and indicate which ones you have prepared and all that jazz. These ones up here always remain prepared regardless. And the reason why I want to ensure that these were of the spell group is because of this. If I've gone through the process of burning through, actually let's use the higher levels, because this is level 2, level 3. If I go through the process of burning through all of my level 3 spells, I want all level 3 spells to disappear from my list of spells that I can cast. Because remember, there is a restriction. I have to have an available spell slot for that spell to be used in order for it to get cast. Excellent. These two groups are working the way that we want it to. Now at level 6, we're going to have to do two things. The first is that we're going to need to increase the Halo of Spores damage that is being done from 1d4 to 1d6, I believe it was. Let me pop that open just briefly. Yeah, 1d6 at level 6. So let's simply delete this dice. All you have to do is right-click on the die box here and select Clear Dice. Then you just drag and drop a replacement die into place. With Fungal Infestation, you now gain the ability to animate the dead with the spores created by your Halo of Spores feature. If a small or medium-sized creature dies within the 10-foot radius of your spores, you can make use of your reaction to animate the dead creature, which will gain only 1 hit point in the process. The animated corpse will remain animated for a period of 1 hour, after which it will collapse and you will be unable to raise it again. When the corpse is animated, it will take all of its actions immediately after your character's turns, and it will make use of the zombie-based stat block, so the DM can simply share over a copy of the zombie NPC via the Fantasy Grounds interface and simply set up a single hit point zombie for you. After that, you have limited control within the combat tracker. You can have it move around, although the DM will have to do the movements, or you can use the only actions that it has, which are those that are going to be in the zombie's stat block. And it is an attack action, and it is only limited to 1 melee attack. Your character can only use this feature a number of times equal to your character's wisdom modifier, so this should be set up in the actions tab so that it can be easily tracked. So the first thing I'm going to do is deal with getting this into our tracker. Apply and copy the group. I am then going to prepare this to be 1 daily use, I believe it is. No, wisdom modifier, so that in this particular case would be 4. So that's 4 daily uses. Okay, there we go. That is now ready to go. Now, in relation to how the zombie is going to work, this is what's going to have to happen. So I've dragged over the Dungeon Master screen, and what I want to do is look for the zombie NPC, which I've already got done here. I then want to drag and drop that into here so that I can create a quote-unquote modifiable zombie, and this is the zombie we want to modify. I'm going to unlock this, and I'm going to set its total number of hit points to be 1. Everything else remains the same. I am then going to drag the icon and drop it on top of our Druid character in the upper left corner. And I will show you why once I switch back to the player screen. I then am going to want to drag and drop that onto the combat tracker, make it visible so that everybody can see it. And then I want to take this icon and drag it onto whatever map that I have open so that it's part of the quote-unquote combat scenario. If you wanted to, you can even rename the creature to something other than zombie so that you have a representation that it is just simply an animated ape, for example. So let's say we animated that ape. I would go animated ape before I had shared this over. Although we will see that this will automatically adjust even after I've shared it over. So I'm now back on the player side, and we can see that we have this animated ape creature that's here. And it's also going to be part of the combat tracker, although in this case it's the zombie, so just stick with that for now. Let me see if I can rename that here. There we go. Forgot to do that. And this should be a hit point of 1. Oh, it's got an initiative of -1. So this creature is going to go immediately after the druid goes. Now, in this particular case, the initiative roll of the druid was a 21. I want this creature to go essentially at 20.9. So I'm going to modify the initiative roll of the zombie to be 20.9, and that will always ensure that it is immediately going to go after the druid because they're technically linked. This way, if a creature rolls the 21 automatically, a 20, it will go here. And a 21, you might have to do some finagling here in order to adjust things a little bit, just to fine tune it, as the DM, that is. Now, the way this is going to work is that when you've completed your turn, you're going to pass the token. As that animated ape, the only things that you can really legitimately do is the weapon attack. So let's have, you can't actually trigger the ability for the ape to target anything. The DM is going to have to do that for you. So I'm going to have the ape attack the actual vampire. And yes, it's currently set up to do so. Now what I can do is this. I can roll it, but it isn't going to actually attack anything. What I have to do is drop that onto the vampire. Now, if the DM had made the attack roll automatically, it would have attacked the vampire because that's what's targeted. If you don't want to go through the process of having the DM actually target the vampire, then this is what you would do. And you just simply drag and drop that onto place. So it's going to be the animated ape attacking the vampire. And I can't seem to get a hit in this case. Come on, hit. There we go. That's a critical hit. Nice. Now, to drag the damage into place, all you have to do is highlight over to where it actually has the damage. You just pick that up. It's going to bring out a dice. You drop that into place. And it will do the damage, including the critical damage, as we saw there, to the vampire. Movement, however, is going to be strictly handled by the DM. So if there's movement inside of a map that's happening, then you're going to tell the DM where you want the animated ape to go, and that is where they will put them, and then you can go through and introduce all of these. Now, this undead fortitude doesn't really come into place, although you could allow a DM could allow this to apply. A lot of cases, DMs won't because your zombie only has 1 hit point. And I just want to be sure that that's in fact the case. Yes, it only has 1 hit point. So so much as anyone sneezes on this animated ape, they're essentially going to fall over. The other thing that really should happen is that the DM should set this up to be friendly to you. And that is just so that you can identify friendlies from those that are not. Now at level 7, we are gaining our next Circle Spores spells. So I've already switched back our character sheet here to the Actions tab. I'm going to drop these into place and then ensure that they are prepared. And the same thing is going to happen again when we get to level 9, which in fact is the next level that we have to do this on. So I'm just going to simply update our levels and then drop our level 9 spells into place. And that completes everything that we need to deal with when it comes to our Circle Spore spells, minus the preparation of these 2 new spells. So we are now 100% done with the Circle Spells feature. When our character gets to level 10, we are going to have to adjust our Halo of Spores feature again. So let me just minimize all these spell tabs and modify the damage that we are going to be dealing for Halo of Spores. In this case, it's going to be 1d8. So again, I'm simply going to right-click on the dice, click the Clear Dice button, grab a 1d8, and drop it into place. Now, the next feature our character is going to gain at level 10 is called Spreading Spores, which allows you to take your Halo of Spores and move it to another location within 30 feet of where your character stands. Your character would also need to have the Symbiotic Entity feature active alongside your Halo of Spores feature in order for this to work. But you could activate this feature within the same turn you activated Symbiotic Entity, as this feature can be used as a bonus action. When your spores are projected to a specific location, they will create a swirl that is about 10 cubic feet wide and will last for about 1 minute. If any creature starts its turn in the cube or moves into the cube, you will be able to use a reaction to apply the Halo of Spores attack and subsequent damage if the target has failed their saving throw. However, as long as that cube exists, the Halo of Spores that would normally be around your character would not exist, preventing you from using your reaction to activate the Halo of Spores damage to anyone who passes within 10 feet of your character. The Spores cube will vanish if you choose to use this feature again, dismiss the cube as a bonus action, or the duration of the Symbiotic Entity has run out. Now, the way that this is going to work is really only going to apply for the duration. What we're going to want to do is drag and drop this feature into place, copy Circle of Spores so that we can move our feature down in here, and we want to create an effect that is literally just going to be a quote-unquote marker or effect or empty effect. I'm just going to call it Circle of Spores, Spreading Spores. And it's going to last for 1 minute. I then will want to ensure that this is set up for self, and it's not going to expire on the next roll. And here is why. When we go through and cast activate the Spreading Spores feature, two things are going to happen. A, Halo of Spores has to exist. So that effect has to be in place. Next, Spreading Spores can come into play if we have anything associated with our Symbiotic Entity. So in this particular case, I'm going to apply the 40 temporary hit points to our character. That'll be my quote-unquote indication that I have activated Symbiotic Entity. I am now going to move my spores to a 10-foot cube, 20 feet away from my character. I'm now going to then apply this effect to my character. And here's what's going to happen. For the duration that this effect is in place, that cube is over in the area that's 20 feet away from my character. Halo of Spores doesn't stick there. Now, if I go through and I burn through 10 turns, one moment there. This one should do it. There we go. Now, the Halo of Spores returns back to our radius or around our character, whereas the other effect is now gone. So this literally is just an effect to indicate that Spreading Spores has been used. If you activate it again, you send it to a different location, it's going to be there for 10 rounds. As you continue through combat, if that still sticks there, because remember, Halo of Spores will last about 100 rounds in total. You don't need to worry about it, and there's still 90 rounds left. So you can use Spreading Spores multiple times, provided there's no usage limitation, and it does not look like there is. So it gives you an area, or a means rather, to move this into different locations during combat. And that's how this thing would work. While creatures pass through that area, so what you would do is you would drag a box on a map to indicate where you've put it, and then the DM will have to ensure that anytime they pass a creature through that section, that creature would take the damage that you would then do through, say, the necrotic damage here. Let's say that now I'm going to activate both because I'm going to make use of the Symbiotic Entity's extra damage aspect here. I'm going to drop it onto that vampire. Now, so that vampire walked through it. They took damage as a result of it. And at level 14, there are two things that we will have to do. We will have to do our final damage increase for the necrotic damage from Halo of Spores. So I'm going to remove that dice and drop in the 1d10. And that completes everything that we have to deal with for Halo of Spores, moving us on to the last feature that our character is going to gain, called Fungal Body. And this feature gives your character immunity to things like blindness, deafness, and can no longer be frightened or poisoned. Additionally, if your character is hit with a critical attack, it will be counted as a normal attack instead, unless your character has otherwise been incapacitated. So let's see what this looks like when we set this up. I'm going to drag and drop that into place, copy this so that I can move it down, and I'm going to create a new effect. In this case, I'm going to call this effect Fungal Body. I'm going to go semicolon, and I'm going to copy a set of entries I've already had prepared. Immune, and it's going to be the frightened, poisoned, to the poison damage, blinded, deafened, and critical effects. So, how long will this last? It's forever. So you can always have this ability in place. Now, how does this work? Well, once your character's dropped into a combat tracker, before you've even rolled initiative, all you have to do is, I should set this up so that it's on self, is apply it to your character. Now, if anything tries to poison you, does poisoned damage, is frightened, or tries to frighten you rather, attempts to blind or deafen you, and even succeeds on a critical hit against you, you will suffer no damage from any of those, except for the critical hit. It will be normal damage. But you will not have any of these effects apply, and you will not receive poison-related damage if something was actually poisoned. So, that is how this particular feature works. This is always going to be there. It's not going to go away. It is literally just simply there. It's now part of your body's nature to exist. This is a resistance that you gain permanently. The Circle of Spores class specialization is definitely a different take on the Druid, and it looks like it could be quite fun, though this might be the kind of Druid that's best partnered with a party that has a Necromancer or is otherwise not goodly in nature, as this would cause some potential conflicts within that party between each of the goodly characters and the Druid, but it could also add an interesting dynamic to that particular party, I suppose. However, that does bring us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.